Hey guys, it's Andy here. I'm the owner of Heart of the Game, and I'm here doing a deck tech on Atraxa today. My commander is Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, and I would say that its power level is an 8, pushing maybe to the 9. Atraxa is a great body for blocking. It provides lifelink, which may not seem super relevant, but when you're going for a super late game deck, lifelink ends up being quite useful. Plus, the proliferate at the beginning of each end step is very useful with Planeswalkers. My deck's main goal is to control the game. It's going to sit there and make sure that the game is being played on my terms. As far as a win, it's got a few late game things like the Scarab God and just swinging with Atraxa. And a lot of times, like, my opponents end up just scooping due to being staxed out by my different commander ultimates, or Planeswalker ultimates. Okay, so the main focus of my deck is to end up ultimating my Planeswalkers right here. Whether it's Elspeth giving all of my creatures +2/+2, I don't run that many, but like when I have the Scarab God and I just keep on putting token after token out, it'll be super useful. Obnixilis is just going to knock somebody out of the game eventually, because whenever anyone draws a card, they're going to lose 2 life. Huge. I mean, every one of these Planeswalkers has a major ability, and these here, Doubling Season, Deeplow Skate, and Oath of Teferi, are going to enable you to ultimate your Planeswalkers. Outside of that, we have a bunch of stax pieces that will hopefully end up preventing your opponent from being able to attack them. Humility is probably the biggest one of all of these, because your opponent losing all of the abilities on their creatures, so like when a Reclamation Sage comes in, it not being able to destroy an enchantment, or not really for this deck, an artifact, that's huge. Moat prevents all creatures without flying from attacking. Pernicious Steed is just going to knock out all of my opponent's creatures. You want to protect your Planeswalkers so that you can continue getting that value out of them. I know I don't usually ultimate them that much. I'll usually use them as removal pieces, whether it's Elspeth blowing up all the creatures, Kaya just removing a Soul Ring. All of those being used continuously is what's going to drive the value in this deck. Sun Titan, I've got a ton of Planeswalkers that aren't even in this pile that it'll get back, as well as Rhystic Study, Stony Silence, that sort of stuff. Nezahal draws you tons of cards, and eventually a 7/7 beat stick will probably end up finishing out the game. I also have Urborg Cabal Coffers in here because my deck's mana cost is a bit higher than a lot of like really competitive decks, so I need to be able to get there eventually. I have a Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale to, once again, just deter my opponent from having lots of creatures to be able to attack my Planeswalkers with. And then I have a whole crop rotation package to use Bojuka Bog to get rid of their graveyards, and bounce lands to reuse Bojuka Bog. The one thing I don't run, because I don't enjoy playing with that play style, is I do not play Armageddon. I don't enjoy blowing up everyone's lands. I think that people should be able to just play the cards that they have, and stopping them from doing that. They might not be useful with cards like Moat and Humility, but at least they got to play the cards, and so I intentionally left out Armageddon. So I would say two pet cards that might not be the most spectacular in the deck, but like I enjoy playing a lot are Drop of Honey, because not a lot of people have this card, and it takes a whole round before it gets back to you and you actually get to destroy your first creature. So it takes a long time to actually activate. It's on the chopping block just because it's not that powerful, but I enjoy playing the card. And Kaya Orzhov Usurper, because it's really useful the more competitive the pod, because when people put out their Soul Rings and you can just exile them, it's super useful. Her plus, the life gain, is fairly irrelevant. Being able to exile a few cards from people's graveyards is good, but like it takes 3 turns to be able to ultimate her, and her ultimate doesn't even necessarily kill anybody unless it's super late game and you've used like Ashiok or Rest in Peace or something, which I am not currently playing Rest in Peace, so Kaya is also another kind of pet card that I just enjoy playing in the deck. Okay, so this deck has a lot of old like legends, enchantments, and lands that you don't necessarily need. One of the big things is Tabernacle is a very expensive card due to its utility and legacy, and that could easily end up being replaced by Pendril Mists or some other enchantment card along that lines that's just going to tax and make your opponent's creatures not as good. Moat, once again, you just need to have something out there that's going to prevent your opponents from attacking your planeswalkers. Moat could end up becoming a sphere of safety so that your opponents have to pay mana in order to attack. Humility, it's a $50 card, and there's not really a direct replacement because knocking out all of your opponent's abilities is super useful, and it's not really on another card. However, because of its expense, you might just want to replace it with a piece of removal. You've got your expensive counterspells, Force of Negation, Force of Will, and Mana Drain. Those can just become additional counterspells that I'm not using, like Dispel or Flusterstorm, those sort of cards. Jace the Mind Sculptor, he's a piece of removal and he's card draw, but his expense is up there, so you could replace him with either one of those. Then we have a whole bunch of like interaction removal pieces. Thoughtseize could easily become a Duress. Toxic Deluge could just become a Wrath of God. The Abyss and Drop of Honey can become like Path to Exile or just some other non-continuous removal, but like more targeted so that you're picking the exact thing that you want. Same thing for Gilded Drake. As long as it's a piece of removal that's going to get rid of an opponent's creature, could be anything, Utter End, those sort of cards. Snapcaster Mage could easily become an Archaeomancer, 4 mana instead of 2, but if you have something that's going to bring him back, like Scarab God, it's a little bit more useful. Then the deck does not need to have Urborg Cabal Coffers. I like using it because it is a really high mana cost deck, and eating out as much of the colorless cost as you can with all of that black mana is very useful. You don't need to have fetches and duels because they're just a high expense. You could just switch them out for more check lands, and then you're probably also, along with taking these out to make sure you get your colors, add in a few more basics and cards like Cultivate and Kadama's Reach that are just going to allow you to fix all of your colors and ramp a little bit. Oh, and my whole deck is very expensive because I've gone through and gotten everything is foiled in the fanciest version I can, pretty much. There's a few that I like the look of the card a little bit more than maybe the most expensive version, but like everything here is far more expensive than what you would need to pay. So, cards that I don't see people using as much that I think perform super well. Humility, like this card is so useful for anybody who's not on a aggro strategy, because the loss of abilities is honestly the biggest thing that you can have on a card, and I just really don't see many people using it that much. Seasons Past. This card generates so much value late game. Obviously, if you switch over to like a rest in peace plan, like you end up having to take this card out, but as long as you're not on a anti graveyard meta, this card will do so much for you that you just have to use it. Bounce lands. These cards are so good because virtual card advantage, because they are 2 lands in 1, and they allow you to reuse things like Bojuka Bog, because sometimes you need to exile more than just one graveyard one time. Ashiok, the prevention of people from searching their libraries, shuts off fetch lands, and the continuous exiling of graveyards is super huge. Kaya Orzhov Usurper, because exiling mana crypts, soul rings, all of that sort of stuff just is so valuable. She comes down as a 3-drop, and then you can just keep on using her to exile cards out of graveyards. Ob Nixilis Reignited. Now this card, it's kind of high at a 5-drop, but he comes down, destroys a creature, and then is a Phyrexian Arena from there on. He also ults immediately off of a doubling season and can take one person out of the game with that ultimate. Nezahal Primal Tide, once again, it's so much card advantage because every time anyone's playing their non-creature spells, you're drawing a card unconditionally. They don't get to pay mana to ignore it. They just get to draw you a card. And then he protects himself by discarding a few of those unuseful cards late game. Okay, some cards that I believe people worry too much about acquiring in this sort of a format that I include in my deck are Snapcaster Mage, Force of Will, Mana Drain, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Thoughtseize, because these cards have easy replacements that are far cheaper. They've just eke out a little bit more utility because of their mana cost or some other reasons, but these cards are useful yet a little bit overrated. And then 2 cards that I believe people, when we're playing the game, focus on and get upset about way too much are Rhystic Study and Drop of Honey. This card takes forever to eke out its advantage because I have to wait until my next turn to destroy the first creature it's going to destroy. And then whenever a board wipe happens, it's just being sacrificed. So it's easy to play around, and I've seen opponents just want to use their counterspell every single time on this, and then somebody else tries to go off and they successfully do because my opponent decided that that Drop of Honey was too good. Another card is Rhystic Study. This card it slows the game down. Everyone can pay that extra 1 mana and not allow their opponent to draw the card. But some people are just too impatient and want to try and go off super quick, so they use their counterspell on this every single time. The game can just be slowed down, and people just value it way too much. I wouldn't say that there are any cards I directly don't use that I would want to. There's possibly Armageddon could upgrade the deck and make it a little bit better, but I don't enjoy playing with that card. And then there's cards depending on the meta that you might want to switch in, like if you want to be on a rest in peace plan, exiling all graveyards because, say, an opponent is using Gitrog or some other graveyard deck like Mirren, you might want to put those in. You might want to focus a bit more on the anti-artifacts if you have tons of people popping out lots of rocks. I only currently run Stony Silence, but there's been points in our meta at this store that I've had Null Rod and Collector Oof all in it. So I have all three versions of anti-artifact hate in the deck. And right now I'm just on Stony Silence. I could also be putting in Soul Ring or Mana Crypt just because walkers end up costing quite a bit, and I haven't put them in since I was on that full artifact hate meta. And they don't overly matter because you can't play your Atraxa using that colorless mana until she's died once or twice. But overall, I have the access to all of the cards, so I've made this deck optimally, but there's a few things that your meta just determines that you can switch in.